Tonight's story begins with a scream at the breakfast table and a mother exploding like a burst of red light. In a single heartbeat, every adult in town is gone, leaving only children to fend for themselves behind a government quarantine. But grief curdles into superstition, superstition into witch hunts, and one girl's family becomes the target of a mob. When the torches rise and forbidden magic answers, blood and fire change everything. This is not survival anymore. This is a coven's reckoning. Welcome to Nightmare Proof, where true horror comes alive. Here, you'll hear real stories of the strange, the disturbing, and the unexplainable. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to face the darkness. It's been a year since our town's adults disappeared. Everyone thinks it was me. I was screaming at Mom when she exploded. 1 minute she was completely in control of the argument, shooting me the mother of all glares across the dining room table, and the next she was dripping from my face like congealed spaghetti sauce. Her voice was still alive in my ears, even with her staining my cheeks, dripping from my lashes. I could taste her in my mouth. "You're a child." Mom's voice echoed in my mind. "I'm old enough to drive a car," I had said matter-of-factly, waving my spoon in protest. I reached for my favorite cereal, but she slapped my hand away and placed a bowl of plain oats in front of me. I had been cursed with an almond. Mom, which meant the only snacks I ever saw, had raisins instead of chocolate chips. Breakfast was always the root of all disagreements in the Sinclair household. Mom wasn't a morning person. My brother and sister had headed to school early. I couldn't imagine why. With your father supervising, Mom's grip on her coffee tightened. I could tell she was ready to blow up, but I was determined to change her mind. Her argument was that she didn't want me to get hurt, but I knew it went deeper than that. Mom wanted to ruin my life. She was an expert at it, already forbidding me from going out of town and enforcing a curfew. I said no, and I mean no, Mom said with a sigh. "You're inexperienced. When you're 18, I'll think about it." End of conversation. She prodded the table impatiently. "Eat your breakfast, please." But that's not fair. I could feel my blood boiling. Why am I the one being punished? You're giving Sarah lessons. She fixed me with a warning look. "You're not being punished." "I clearly am," I retorted. "I don't see this same energy with Nathaniel." Mom sighed. "Your brother is 1 year older. He is old enough to drive a car. I'm finished discussing this matter with you. If you disagree, you're free to move out and make up your own rules." I slammed my spoon on the table, but Mom sipped her coffee. End of conversation. "You're not even being fair." Mom's eyes narrowed. "End." She put heavy emphasis on the word. "Of con. I didn't even want to hear it." She was so stubborn, even more childish than me, and I was supposed to be the kid. Instead of listening to her, I pressed my hands over my ears and screamed in frustration. My own words trembled on my lips, halting when something warm splashed across my face, followed by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I felt the shock of it, rich copper filling my mouth and splattering over my eyes. Initially, I thought she'd gone to the extreme and thrown her coffee in my face. But coffee wasn't this thick and coppery, clinging to my lashes and blurring my vision. It sounded like a nuclear bomb had gone off right in front of me. A slowly expanding bright light, darkness speckling across my eyes, and then nothing. Mom was there, scowling at me disapprovingly, and then she wasn't. I remember her face, being carved with morning sunlight filtering through the blinds, her loose ponytail trailing down her back, and her bright pink bathrobe. I blinked, slowly, the ringing sound growing louder, more intense, like a singular coin rattling around in my skull. The sunlight was still there, but it was blocked out, only existing in strands of glittering light peeking through the intense smear of red covering my eyes. She was everywhere, and yet also somehow still existing in front of me, her torso swaying back and forth like a bad fucking cartoon. Blinking red from my eyes, I could sense a cry slowly clawing its way up my throat. Different shades of red covered our kitchen, painting the walls and dripping from the countertop. The coin rattling in my skull stopped dancing. My ears popped, and the world came to a grinding stop around me. Something wet and fleshy dropped from the ceiling, and the scream that had been wrangled in my throat, fighting for an escape, slipped out in a sob that racked my chest. Mom felt like congealed spaghetti sauce clinging to my face, pieces of her skull sticking to my pajamas. When her torso smacked onto the ground, a horrifying cavern where her head used to be, I stumbled back, slipping in the spreading red pool gliding across our kitchen tiles. I remembered how to move. In one stride, I was out of the kitchen, gasping for breath, my hands on my knees. In 2 strides, I was standing on our doorstep, staring dazedly at a crashed car in the middle of the road. Several of them scattered down the block. I recognized this one, Mrs. Petra's Honda Civic. The car had flipped onto its side, but I could see the scarlet dripping from the windows. There was someone in there, a little girl, 5 or 6 years old. Her mouth was wide, O-shaped, streaks of red pooling down her face, dark ringlets of hair stuck to her pale skin. Emily, her daughter. I didn't hear her cries until my ears popped again. But this time it wasn't just Emily. Screams were erupting across my neighborhood. Our town had come to a standstill, shrieking car alarms joining the cacophony of cries, enveloping together. Pulling Emily out of the smoking wreck of the car, I covered the little girl's eyes and held her to my chest. What was left of Mrs. Petra was slumped in her seatbelt. It wasn't just my mother and Mrs. Petra. After taking Emily home, the effects of seeing my mother blown to pieces right in front of me started to blossom. I scratched at the skin of my arm, but I couldn't get her off of me. She was caked into my hair and glued to my lashes. I spat several times, and then my gut lurched, heaving up undigested cereal. In a daze, I checked every house. Each one held a similar scene, an explosion of grisly red and children without parents. Once the ringing in my ears subsided and I regained some control over myself, I joined the growing crowd of kids searching for answers. A kid on a skateboard told me there had been a crash at the end of the road, and I remembered my siblings. I headed toward the school, feeling sick to my stomach. I found them among a group of kids, sitting on the sidewalk, looking dazed. They didn't react when I tried to hug them. Sarah's eyes were vacant, unseeing caverns staring into oblivion. Nathaniel wouldn't look me in the eye, squeezing me a little too tightly, pressing his head into my shoulder still stained with our mother. He was a shell of his former self, the brother I had playfully fought with just hours earlier because he refused to let me drive his car. Sarah had wanted to ride the bus, and in a mark of rebellion, Nathaniel had followed her. If they had decided to drive to school, they could have been dead. Nathaniel dropped his head into his lap, panting into his jeans. Sarah kept shooting me hopeful looks, like I would know what to do. 2 years younger than me, my little sister was already looking at me as if I were an adult. Their bus had overturned, intense red seeping onto the road, shattered windows, and headless bodies littering the sidewalk. Kids wandered around, confused, covered in what remained of the bus driver. Nathaniel and Sarah seemed to be the only ones consciously awake, while others cried out for their parents. The 3 of us hugged, but I could barely feel my siblings wrapped around me. I had no idea how to tell them that our mother's blood was all over me. From their expressions, Nathaniel wrapping Sarah into a hug and my sister sobbing into his chest, they already knew. Our town had been normal, like every other, and in the blink of an eye, everything was gone. Parents, we were covered in them. Teachers. Upon pushing through the school entrance, there was carnage. Traumatized 14-year-olds were hysterical, dripping in scarlet, while the older kids seized the opportunity to run wild without adult authority, trashing classrooms and raiding vending machines. It was everyone. 99.9% of our town's population exploded that day, but it was my mother who was still staining my face, her blood ingrained into my flesh. I couldn't scrub her off of me, no matter what I did. The outside came to help in a matter of hours. I wouldn't call it help, though. According to the outside, we were a town going through an unprecedented event. which meant a quarantine cutting us off from the outside world. After briefing us in the school auditorium, we were told not to panic and that help was coming. Spoiler alert, they were scared of us and what they thought was a contagion, so that so-called help didn't exist. That left babies without mothers, the preschoolers without parental figures, and an entire school of teenagers to fend for themselves. You would think a group of kids would know what to do in a town-wide apocalypse, right? Especially when we had been abandoned by the outside world. In the first few weeks, we went kind of insane. Lord of the Flies, insane. If you were vocal, you became a leader. And that meant the popular kids started to take control, taking advantage of kids with no family and nothing to lose, and recruiting them into gangs. Thankfully, that stopped when help did eventually come. Several drones were sent into our quarantine zone 1 month into the town-wide lockdown. They brought boxes full of medical supplies, food, electronics, despite them turning off the internet 2 months later due to a breach in security. Wendy Carmichael had made a now-deleted Reddit post entitled, "We Are Trapped," the story of my town under quarantine. Wendy quickly became an outsider after we were forced to hand over all of our electronics. There were also instructions on building a community in unprecedented times. We were told to elect a leader, a spokesperson who would make the rules. Gracie Lockhart became that person. She was the only one who wanted to run, and I guess everyone was scared of her because her now dead father happened to be mayor. Still though, kids wanted someone to look up to, someone to tell them what to do and give them a sense of purpose. Rules were put into place, and everyone over the age of 13 were given a job, whether that was a cook at the university where meals were served, or stuck in the preschool with the kids. In the first month, I was a delivery girl. When the electronics were still working, kids used all of that pent-up frustration and trauma on shopping. So, I would wake up at 5 a.m. every day, bike to the barrier standing between our town and the outside world, and pick up the growing mountain of Amazon packages dumped on our side. I enjoyed my time as a delivery girl. I used it as a distraction from thinking about Mom's death. I barely saw my brother and sister, apart from at night. The three of us had taken up residence in a random house we'd found. Sarah liked the swimming pool, but we chose it because it was far away from our parents. Sarah's job was at the kindergarten, which she hated with a passion, while Nathaniel was an unwilling member of the research committee. Not exactly a job that helped us, but Gracie and her carefully chosen council, who were just literally her friends, forced my brother and several others to scour the town and find out how this happened. Nathaniel said it was just an excuse for the popular kids to slack off. We already had a scientific explanation, presented to us by the CDC themselves. It was a contagion that worked like spontaneous human combustion and seemed to be leaving children alone. Gracie's group were obsessed with this huge conspiracy that went from aliens to a lab leak at the local university where they were convinced biological weapons were being made. Nathaniel had requested several times to be given another job, but one particular girl on the research committee had a crush on my brother. With her being so close to Gracie and the newly instated town council, she had a certain amount of authority and could abuse it any way she wanted. And fuck, did she abuse it. Gradually, as it became progressively more obvious that the outside world had left us to rot, and our community started to run out of the rations provided for us, the council began to take advantage of the amount of power they had. Sure, blame it on repressed trauma or PTSD, but I would go as far to say these kids were sociopaths. We called them the Dark Days, because in a matter of weeks, our world started to come apart. It started with a message from the outside that our food was delayed. So, we starved. The kids in power started getting bored. Kids were refusing to work without food. Normal crashed and burned, humanity bleeding away into something else. Those in authoritative positions were no longer quietly plucking the good-looking guys and girls for their own personal pleasure. They were ordering our police force, a small group of volunteers, to drag them from their homes and present them to the council. Please bring all chocolate to the council, guys with gross fucking haircuts. I'm talking about you, Oliver Bentley, are no longer allowed inside the cafeteria. Cut your hair and look decent, or starve. Any cute dogs must be handed over. If you're physically attractive and want one of the last cans of soup, you can earn it. Only hot guys and girls. If you look like a hobbit, you'll be turned away. So yeah, normal began to crumble. We tried to uphold it, but when the council started using older kids as toys and playthings, that was when our little community fell apart. Nathaniel was one of those chosen to serve the council, in what started as a stupid announcement and quickly turned into a rule. Those who were chosen to be right hands to the council must not resist, or their loved ones would suffer. We were starving, delirious, and going crazy. Before our leader could go full Lord of the Flies, however, the outside world stepped in, thank God. Gracie had her leadership revoked, along with her council, and all of her orders were thankfully banned. Nathaniel and the others were freed. Sarah and I dragged him from a hotel room, which looked innocent enough. We found him playing Switch games cross-legged on the floor. According to Nathaniel, there was a lot of PG-13 non-consensual groping. He laughed it off, but there was an emptiness in his eyes I didn't like. His smile was too big. Sarah pointed out blood on the bedsheets, but I blocked it out, nodding dizzily when Nathaniel insisted he was fine. The perpetrator, who had my brother and 5 other senior girls and guys trapped in her hotel room fashioned into a sex den, was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in shame. I called it out as sexual assault, and thankfully, more kids spoke out. Gracie was indirectly arrested, meaning as soon as the quarantine was over, she and her little group were in big trouble. I heard the charges were severe: forced imprisonment and non-consensual sex. For the time being, they were put on house arrest. Thankfully, a new council was built from kids with actual intelligence and a passion for leadership. Liam Cartwright became our leader, and in his first role of replacement mayor, he demanded the soldiers bring us enough food and supplies to last us for a month. The outside world reluctantly complied, and we went back to normal-ish. The girl who sexually assaulted my brother, Tally Edwards, was officially a missing person, which became our first real case. Liam put together a force of 10 able-bodied kids to act as a police force and investigate the girl's disappearance. I got my job back as a delivery girl. When our internet was cut off, though, I became a sort of food delivery service instead, but I liked it. There was something therapeutic about awaiting our daily shipments, watching the outside world continue while we had come to a grinding halt. A year passed, without parents, adults, and normality, but we made it work. We were a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds trying to keep afloat. Normal. But just like the world outside, death existed in our makeshift community too. 5 kids. Mostly from neglect. Taryn James and her friends had found a dead baby inside the wreck of a car. A 15-year-old girl had jumped out of a tree on a dare and landed headfirst. 3 toddlers had come down with fevers that killed them, despite us having the right medical supplies. We might have had medicine, but the kids working at the hospital had no idea what they were doing. Why would they? The eldest was 17, and he ran away, puking into his hand. When the 15-year-old was brought in, half of her skull caved in. The outside world only helped us with food. The rest, we had to fend for ourselves. The assholes didn't even send in medics. In their words, it was a risk they couldn't take. Little kids were dying, but because of a phantom contagion that was yet to claim any more lives, they couldn't save them. Kids weren't just dying, they were disappearing too. The missing had doubled. 2 kids were now gone, both of them part of Gracie's original council, and Gracie herself had somehow managed to build her own little cult. She believed that God had taken her friends, and they had simply followed our parents to heaven. Judgment Day was a new one. The week before, Gracie was screaming about aliens and lights in the sky when I biked past the school, where a concerning number of followers sat in a circle around her. Now she was convinced her friends had been raptured. Cliques had formed around town, which became noticeable on my bike ride. You can't be cut off from the outside without forming a cult-like group. But hey, we all had our ways of coping with losses we couldn't even register. I had my own group. My fellow delivery kids. We weren't exactly a cult, But we were a family, and we had cute lime green uniforms and caps. The sun was setting when I was starting my night shift, sitting on the barrier, my legs dangling. The sky was a smear of orange and red, and I found myself hypnotized by the dying sunlight illuminating the clouds. I wasn't technically allowed to sit on the barrier. If I fell off, I was donezo. But it was fun to get a peek into the outside world. If I tilted my head at just the right angle, I could see a fully functioning McDonald's in the distance, ironically bathed in a heavenly glow. Below me, the winding road was blocked off with yellow tape, barricades in place. Nathaniel was on my mind. His new job was taking up all of his time, but when he was free, he still didn't come home. I told him to request a Zoom appointment with a therapist. The outside world was offering them every week in the library, where there was restricted internet access. But he kept saying he was good. He seemed like it on the outside. On weekends, Nate would act like the annoying older brother he had always been, fighting over the shower and hiding cereal from Sarah and I. But even when he was laughing, his expression didn't match his eyes. I wanted to talk about what happened with him and Tally. Maybe he thought it was his fault she was missing. Sarah had told me to step off for a while, though this had been going on for months. It's like something inside was killing him, eating away at him. And I knew it was what happened inside that hotel suite. Testing. A familiar drawl crackled through my talkie, sticking out of my pocket and cutting through my thoughts. Nathaniel was fine, I thought. I was just overreacting. My colleague's voice was a welcome distraction, bleeding into the peaceful silence. The British accent was the icing on the cake. Do they have ramen? I repeat. We are in short supply of ramen. He paused. Especially the carbonara-style ones. You know, the ones in the TikTok store. He sighed, his voice immediately bringing my mood up. Ah, yes, TikTok. I miss my daily supply of brain-rotting dopamine. Do you remember those pool-filling videos? They were what made me realize I had undiagnosed ADHD. Jude Lightwood was an unlikely friend. I barely knew him before the quarantine. And now I knew his deepest, darkest secrets he spilled to me during our night shift, awaiting our weekly delivery. Jude took the other side of town, while I took the main entrance. We spent most of our time talking on the talkies, or in his case, giving me his entire life story. Still though, nothing beats staying up until the early hours of the morning, watching the first flicker of dawn appear in the sky, listening to him half deliriously reenact the entire first season of Breaking Bad from memory. Yes, even with the voices. I missed a delivery once because I was almost on the edge of hysterics, laughing at his Jesse Pinkman impression, which was to a freaking T. Pulling out my talkie, I pressed the button, swinging my legs in midair. You do know they're MREs, right? I don't think we have a choice. We'll be lucky to get rice and chicken. I paused. Also, you don't seem like the type of guy who used to go on TikTok. He wasn't. Before the disaster, Jude spent most of his time in the school library. He was known for his side hustle, selling candy to seniors. He started as a British exchange student who nobody could understand, and quickly rose up in the social hierarchy due to his accent. I only knew him from English class, when our teacher had asked him what the capital of Australia was, and Jude, half asleep, had responded with, "Huh? New Zealand?" He was officially New Zealand to me, until he formally introduced himself on my second day on the job, offering me coffee and spilling it all over himself. Jude scoffed. I enjoyed his presence, even if it was just his voice. I just said I watched pool-filling videos, like in a total trance. He laughed, but then his laugh kind of choked up. I could tell he was having a light bulb moment. He had them a lot, and they were all related to what happened to the town's adults. What if it's like gods? Jude had proclaimed into the whipping wind one morning. The two of us cycling to work. When I twisted around to shoot him a pointed look, he shrugged, cycling harder, reddish dark hair flying in a blur around him. It's probable. Like, what if Zeus is pissed? He's punishing us. Aliens? He'd said, while we were lifting packages onto the loading bay. I hit him with a package in my hands. Cthulhu? Jude mumbled, half asleep. The two of us labeling envelopes. What if it's microchips in our brains? Jude came out with it through a mouthful of mashed potato during lunch, the two of us lounging on the school roof. His second epiphany of the day. When I shoved him, he laughed. This guy's charming smile made it hard for me to hate him. He came up with these what-ifs to drive me crazy, I swear. His theories stretched all the way to our town, somehow being related to the Simpson movie, though this time I caught a certain seriousness in his tone. What if that is what saved us? I pondered his question, watching a bird swoop across the sky. You think TikTok saved us from combusting? No, he laughed. Well, yes, stay with me here, but adults don't use it much, right? Jude took a deep breath. I could tell he had already jumped to the next tangent. Wait, I can see a group of kids in the town across from us eating Five Guys. My mouth is watering. He groaned. This is torture. I can see the fried onions. I can see the animal-style fries and sauce. Jeez, how good was his sight? Do you have binoculars? I couldn't resist a laugh. No. Yes, maybe. I'm just borrowing them. Jude, I said, shuffling uncomfortably. My butt had gone to sleep. Are you sitting on the barrier? He didn't reply for a moment. That depends. Is a certain Liam Cartwright with you? I spluttered, holding the button down. You think our 17-year-old mayor is checking up on the delivery kids? Poor Liam is probably asleep. Oh God, yeah. I could sense him making a face. Our boy is starting to look like a divorced father of 3. Jude cleared his throat, and the feedback went right through me. I am sitting on the barrier, by the way. I can see Orion from here. I used to look at constellations with my mum. She had one of those cool ancient telescopes. Something sickly twisted in my gut. Tipping my head back, I searched for the star, though I wasn't sure where I was looking. So, you're looking through the tiny hole in the barrier? Mm-hmm, he chuckled. Curse my 20/20 vision. I wanted to get an idea of what normal life is like, and I get hit in the face with burgers. I want Five Guys so bad. I would kill for one. I could hear him adjusting the dial on the talkie. Did you know some people, desperate enough, would kill for takeout? There was a pause, and I heard his slight intake of breath, his shuffling, crackling into interference. I didn't even have to reply. Jude never stopped talking. Don't you think this is kinda cool? Apart from the whole, end of the world, dystopian, only our town thing. I could see my breath dancing in front of me and zipped up my jacket, responding in a gasp. Freezing our asses off, waiting for mediocre meals. No, like what we're doing. I feel like I'm keeping watch for the undead, while my friends, the last survivors of humanity, sleep, Jude snorted. Instead, I'm a glorified Uber Eats delivery guy for a community of kids. You enjoy it though, I said through a yawn, rubbing my hands together. The early November chill was already seeping into my bones. He responded in a hum. It's aight, Jude sighed, leaving us both in a peaceful silence. How did you get on the barrier, Rhea? His question took me off guard, an ice-cold shiver ripping down my spine. What? Well, I have Ben to give me a hand to climb up. Even if he sleeps all the way through his shift, his bulky legs make up for it. But you? You're alone. So how exactly are you getting up there? He paused, and the shriek of feedback sent me jolting, immediately losing my concentration. Jude laughed, and I couldn't resist twisting around, scanning the empty road behind me. No sign of any life. My radio crackled, and I jumped for the first time in a while. Wait! Jude's tone had significantly darkened. So, you're telling me you managed to scale a barrier this high with zero help? For a moment, my tongue was tangled. I stand on crates. I said, obviously. Jude hummed. Sounds like bullshit, Rhea. I tightened my grip on my talkie, fingering the off switch. Why do you care? Oh, I don't, he chuckled. I'm just curious how you learned how to climb this high." The silence that followed twisted my gut into knots. I could just hear Jude's breathing, and, if I really listened out for it, the late evening traffic coming through the town over the barrier. Jude surprised me with a laugh. "I'm just messing with you, Rhea. The night shift goes to my head, you know? I gotta find new ways of bantering with ya." "Sure," I said, but my chest was clenching. "Ooh, shit. I think my delivery is here. I gotta go before they spot me on the barrier," he panted. Over and out," or whatever you're supposed to say. Switching off the talkie and cutting off his farewell, a fresh slither crept down my spine. My delivery came soon after. 5,000 MREs. I tore into the first one, unable to help myself, but Jude's words were still in my mind, making me paranoid. Paranoia made me desperate. Being desperate made me remember how hungry I was. I was stuffing handfuls of cold rice and chicken into my mouth when the sour-faced man helping me unload the shipment cleared his throat. "You're supposed to microwave it, sweetheart." I ignored him. "Is this it?" I said through a mouthful of mush. Mush had never tasted so fucking good. "No snacks?" He threw me a crushed Milky Way, making sure to keep his distance. "There's a snack. Knock yourself out." After spending all night delivering MREs to locked doors that were normally open and welcoming, I finally reached home with 3 ready to eat. I had picked the best ones for my family. Chili for Nathaniel, chicken and noodles for Sarah, and fried rice for me. When I opened the door, I was greeted to soft snores, my little sister sleeping on the couch, and Nathaniel wrapped up in a blanket on the floor. I pulled my food out of the package, threw it in the microwave, and then collapsed on the floor next to my brother. I was so tired. So fucking tired. I could barely move my legs. "What did Jude say again?" "How exactly did you get onto the barrier, Rhea?" The microwave dinging didn't wake me up. The stink of burning plastic and cremated food did. "Get up." The voice was familiar, pulling me out of my thoughts. When I didn't move, someone kicked me violently in the stomach, and something was dropped onto my head. I sat up, a scream clawing in my throat, the burned remnants of my dinner dripping down my face. Standing over me were 2 pairs of feet, and when I looked up, I glimpsed Gracie Lockhart. She made sense. She was a psycho. But not Liam, our mayor, who was supposed to be sane. "Get up!" This time, I was kicked in the head. I felt my brain bounce around my skull, my vision blurring. I was on my feet, off balance. All around me was a startling orange. I thought it was from the microwave catching fire, but then the blurred orange was moving. Gracie, Liam, and 2 other guys held flaming torches. The light was mesmerizing. I found myself transfixed until I snapped out of it. Nathaniel was in front of me, his arms bound behind his back. A squeaking, muffling Sarah was struggling in between 2 girls' grasp. I found my voice. "What? What's going on?" My arms were violently pinned behind my back. When I twisted around, I found myself eye to eye with my best friend. Jude wore a hooded sweatshirt, his curls hidden underneath. He didn't meet my gaze, shoving me toward the door along with the others. "Witch!" Gracie spat in my face before yanking me out of our house and throwing me to my knees. I tried to lift my head, but Gracie stomped on my back, and I bit back a shriek. Nathaniel and Sarah were thrown down next to me, and I stared at the reflection in my brother's eyes, following the orange glow that lit up the darkness. In front of us, a horde of kids stood, all holding torches burning bright. "We've found them!" Gracie cried to the crowd, and they cheered, a psychotic hive mind, thirsty for our blood. "We have found the evil who did this to our parents, who trapped us!" She had to be kidding, right? Nathaniel shook his head, eyes wide. "What? You're fucking serious?" Gracie crouched in front of us and held up her phone. Her evidence was a screenshot of a tweet posted the same day the adults exploded. It read only, "The Sinclairs are witches." Posted from an account with 0 followers, 0 likes, and a default profile picture. Panic crept into my gut. The town was already losing their minds from isolation and starvation. Could they really believe we had started this? Jude. I found my voice, a sharp squeak I didn't trust. When Gracie screamed, "Blood for blood!" and forced me to my feet by my hair, I caught his eye in the crowd. "Jude, I'm not a fucking witch." "You killed my mom," he said in a whisper, a demented laugh slipping through his lips. "She was all over me, and I couldn't breathe. Her blood was stuck to me. She was everywhere, Rhea." "You know me," I managed to cry out. "Jude, you know this is bullshit." He didn't reply, his expression hardening. I wish I could have seen a glitter of influence in his eyes, but it was all him. Jude's fear had turned him into a monster. "Burn the witch," he said in a whimper, his lip curling. The boy's expression contorted. His hiss became a yell, cutting through the crowd's screams. "Fucking burn them! Burn them!" the crowd hollered. I stopped fighting when we were dragged through town, rotten food and soiled diapers thrown in our faces. I knew where we were headed, and my body had gone numb. Nathaniel stayed still, silent, his dark eyes finding his friends in the crowd. Sarah screamed, sobbing, begging to a group of kids who already decided her fate. It was Jude who shoved me against our founder tree, binding me to my siblings. It was Jude who stepped back, gripping his torch for dear life. They surrounded us, a ring of blazing fire and expressions riddled with excitement. Gracie stepped forward, Liam by her side. I knew, in her fucked up little mind, killing us would bring back the adults. And she had spread the word, like a virus, polluting the town's minds. Rhea Sinclair. She stepped in front of me, then the others. Nathaniel Sinclair. She was gentle with my sister, forcing Sarah's head up with the tip of her manicure. And Sarah Sinclair. "We find you guilty of witchcraft," she said. "Your sentence is burning in the pits of hell where you belong." I didn't take her seriously, not even with a burning torch in her grasp, until the girl pulled out a knife from her pocket. I turned my attention to the sky when the blade was drawn across my sobbing sister's throat. When her cries gurgled and deep dark red spotted the earth, I looked at the moon poking from the clouds instead. I didn't see my sister die. I just saw her body slump over, her head of dark brown curls hanging in her face. The crowd's reaction was haunting. Calls for my sister's head to be severed and waved in the air in triumph. I kept my gaze on the sky, tears filling my eyes. "Nate," I managed to get out. "She's dead," I wanted to scream. "Our sister is dead!" "Nate," I screamed. He didn't reply, even when Gracie knelt in front of him and dragged the blade of the knife down his cheek and forcing him to look at her with the tip of her nail. "You're a fucking murderer," he said in a whimper, only for her to spit in his face. Nathaniel didn't blink, struggling in his restraints. "Witch." Gracie Lockhart snarled at him, pressing the knife deeper. "You're a filthy witch, Nathaniel Sinclair." I don't know what sealed the deal. Was it Gracie parading my sister's body in front of him, or spitting in his face? I could feel it already, icy prickles creeping down my bare arms, already playing with strands of my hair. When I twisted my head, Nathaniel was smiling. I saw the contortion in his cheeks, amusement morphing into agony, unnatural darkness spiderwebbing across his pupils. Velvet magic. He stunk of it. I fucking knew the asshole was using it. Velvet magic, also known as possession magic, had been banned a long time ago. It is to witches what drugs are to humans. Addictive. Drawn from dark energy that humans naturally make, it is well known to take over the mind and soul of the witch possessing it. If my brother had been using velvet magic, he was doing so with purpose. I was too, but I was inexperienced. Just like my mother said that morning. Only when I turned 18 would I be able to experiment with possession magic. I have a confession. What I wrote at the start wasn't the complete truth. Yes, I did scream at my mother. How was I supposed to know fuck off and die would actually work? And more so, How would I know it would take out half of the fucking town? Nathaniel was our family witch. Why was he using velvet magic in the first place? I had secretly been tearing myself apart for a year over my magic being the cause of our town-wide disaster. Was I wrong? Did he kill the adults? I should have been horrified when Gracie's brain started to leak out of her ears, except she murdered my sister and had bound me to a tree. Led a government that assaulted my brother. The girl squeaked, slamming her hand over her mouth, smearing red dripping down her face. Nate. I shot him a look, but I don't think he saw it. Nathaniel just saw our little sister's dead body. I lost my breath when, with a single flick of his finger behind his back, Gracie's head was splitting apart, her delighted grin twisting into horror. She didn't even get to feel it, a mercy I knew the bitch didn't deserve. When a chunk of the girl's skull landed on the ground, lips still split into a grotesque skeletal grin, the crowd went silent. Before, screams. Gracie's body hit the ground and then caught alight, flames dancing across her skin. Without a word, Nathaniel calmly pulled apart his restraints, and with a single jerk of his wrist, an agonizing scream escaping his lips, his eyes filled with black, sent the crowd flying several feet. I watched kids thrown back, helpless dolls caught in an invisible wind. One boy slammed into a tree, his body crumpling. A girl bisected on a wire fence. I didn't realize how powerful my brother really was. I should have cared about them, cared that they were dying, hurting, but they had murdered my fucking sister. When Nate dropped his hands, his gaze found mine and he opened his mouth. But his words were drowned out by mechanical shrieking from above us. Looking up, a helicopter was hovering, and I remembered my mom's words. Do not draw attention to yourselves, do you hear me? Her words echoed in my mind, when another helicopter appeared. There are bad people, Rhea. Bad witches looking for us, and if they find us, they'll kill us. Our entire coven in this town. They'll burn it to the ground. Nathaniel ignored the presence in the sky, wrapping his arms around me, squeezing me into a hug. The darkness in his eyes, spiderwebbing across his face, was something else. Velvet magic. He was consumed by it, drowning darkness. But I didn't hate it. If he was going to avenge Sarah, then so be it. 1,500, Nate whispered into my shoulder before pulling away, his breaths heavy. 1,500. His voice contorted into a giggle, which wasn't my brother's. Mom taught us about possession magic. It converts witches, filling their minds with dark influence. But I wanted it to fill him, if he was going to save our sister. Blood for blood. Before I could respond, rough hands were on my bindings, tugging them apart. Come on, a voice hissed out. But I was watching my brother scoop Sarah's body into his arms. Are you stupid? Do you really want to hang around and let yourself be caught? I was dizzy, dragged by a shadow I fought against. But I was too weak, my magic rolling right off of him. They're rounding up witches, idiot! The shadow's voice bled into one I knew. Jude. Immediately, I twisted around, aiming a kick to his face, which he easily dodged, grabbing my shoulders. I glimpsed that exact same flicker of darkness in his eyes. Velvet magic. The asshole was one of us, hiding in plain sight, and didn't save my sister. In fact, the bastard watched. He dragged me back, pulling me into a clearing when the crowd started screaming, this time led by Liam. Nathaniel had killed at least 10 kids. When I risked a look, my brother was carrying my sister away, unfazed by the yells from above telling him to stay where he was. When sparks of dazzling purple hit the ground like fireworks, I realized the people shooting at us were not human. Witches. Jude's lips latched to my ear, his breath ice cold. Your idiot brother just gave them a reason to start hunting us down, and the Sinclairs are at the top of their list. So, if I were you, he spoke through gritted teeth, I would start running. Thank you for watching Nightmare Proof. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep the nightmares alive. Have a story of your own? Send it in, and you may hear it here next time. Until then, sleep well if you can.